Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh was in Winnipeg today. He's calling for federal funding to go towards solving health worker shortages. Singh stopped by APTN HQ earlier in the day. Mr. Singh, you're in Winnipeg in part talking about health care. Indigenous peoples already lag behind in terms of quality health outcomes. How would the Liberals' proposed health care changes adversely affect Indigenous peoples?
Well, we know that when our healthcare system is not where it needs to be, it is the most vulnerable people that will feel the repercussions of that. So if our healthcare system is failing, it's going to fail the people who need it most. And that means racialized people, Indigenous people, people who are already marginalized. And the current agreement or the current negotiated deal that the Prime Minister has with the province of Manitoba doesn't include any strings attached or any conditions that would actually solve the healthcare crisis. The major problem we have is a shortage of healthcare workers. That's nurses, doctors, support workers. And the fact that no conditions were imposed to require the province of Manitoba in this case, to actually solve the problem by spending that money on hiring frontline healthcare workers means the gaps that already exist for Indigenous community members in terms of accessing healthcare will only get worse.
In recent weeks, there's been some tragic house fires in First Nations that some of your MPs have spoken about, most recently in Pekanjikam, but also in Weenusk. What, if anything, at the federal level would you do about the lack of fire standards on First Nations?
We need to immediately respond with having the proper supports in place for fire prevention and fire protection services. People need to be able to live in their homes with the security of knowing that if anything ever goes wrong, they can access services. And just because someone lives in a rural or remote community, lives on an Indigenous reserve, that doesn't mean they have any less right to making sure they live in a safe and secure place. And so we need to invest in proper housing that can keep people safe, but also make sure that fire services are available so that communities are safe. And so far, it's been woefully inadequate. People do not have the safety and security that they deserve, particularly Indigenous communities living in reserves and in more remote and rural communities. That has to change, and we would immediately, I would as Prime Minister, immediately fix that.
You bring up housing, and the NDP recently brought up the problems with housing in question period right before the House went on break. A week ago, an Indigenous Housing Association based in BC asked for $6 billion in the next federal budget as a fix for the problem. Do you see that as being a solution?
Well, one of the things that we really know is a major problem is there's a lot of fancy announcements that say that you can access this money to build more housing, and then when Indigenous communities try to access it, it's not there, it's inaccessible, the criteria is too lengthy, too hard to actually use, and none of the money actually flows to where it's needed. So we've pushed the government to develop a for Indigenous, by Indigenous housing fund, and it's really the way the funds are delivered. They have to be accessible, it's got to be straightforward, it has to work for the needs of Indigenous communities. And that's something that we've seen so far has not been there. Many chiefs have complained about trying to get a project up and running and saying they've got the project, they know what they want to build, but there's no fund that they can actually access. I want to change that. I want to make sure that programs that we offer are actually accessible to the people who need it. And that seems to me like a starting point, but that's something that we're fighting for and something that we've included in our agreement, and we're seeing some steps forward on this for Indigenous, by Indigenous strategy, which would really be tailored to the community's needs and respond to them.
You know, we look at housing, healthcare, fire safety, water. You know, your party has a deal with the Liberal Party to keep them in power, but this is a party that seems to continue to disappoint Indigenous peoples in this country. Are you willing to continue that support of the Liberals, given their track record?
Well, what we're doing is using our power to deliver on things like the for Indigenous, by Indigenous housing with funding and a plan that actually gets money to communities to build homes. We've delivered with dental care for folks that did not have dental care coverage. We sent out a GST rebate of almost $467 for over 10 million Canadians, doubling the GST rebate. So we've been able to send real supports to people and want to use our agreement to leverage it to get more help to people. And that means help with healthcare, with housing, and we'll continue to do that. We always have the option of withdrawing our support and we will always consider that as an option. And we will make that decision whether we do so or not in terms of what is in the best interest of Canadians. And if we are no longer able to force this government to deliver for people, then we'll make that choice.
Just lastly here, the move to ban TikTok on government devices. You're the most followed Canadian member of Parliament on the popular social media app. What do you make of the ban, and do you feel like it might hurt your ability to get the message out?
Well, on a personal note, I'm not concerned about it at all. I want to be able to reach out to people wherever they are, whether it's in a community center or on a social media platform. But when serious concerns are raised around privacy and security, particularly not just of myself, but of people interacting with me on that platform, I'm more than content to take a pause from the platform. That's what I'm doing, and assessing if there's a way to engage in a way that will be safe for Canadians, for myself, but also for people that want to engage with me on that platform. So we'll wait to hear about that, and we're going to follow the House of Commons rules now that ban it on federal devices, and that's something that myself and my team will be doing.
Mr. Singh, we'll have to leave it there, but appreciate you making some time to pop by APTN HQ today.
Thanks so much. An honor to be on the show.